Kris has been working in technical staffing for over 20 years. He's the founder and CEO of, how do you say that, Kris? Tiro Security?
Tiro or Tiro. Either
or Tiro. Okay, beauty. Kris is a cybersecurity staffing and professional services firm that he's founded there over 7 years ago now. He's also recently founded a staff retention software and services company called, now I don't know how to pronounce that one. You call it kmute?
Yeah, exactly as it sounds, kmute.
Kmute. So very, very nice play on words there. This is the current president of the Los Angeles Cloud Security Alliance chapter, and is a founding board member of the original Southern California chapter that is now San Diego, Orange County, and Los Angeles. So well and truly a Southern Californian resident and working hard in that part of the country. He serves as an advisory board member for the National Cybersecurity Training and Education Center, otherwise known as NCyTE. Outside the office, you're probably going to catch Kris planning his next vacation, which will more than likely involve chasing powdery snow on the slope somewhere or finding the next place for his favorite occupation while not working in InfoSec, which is scuba diving. All right, Kris. Well, with that, we will turn it over to you, sir, and we'll let you take it away for the presentation.
And this is actually my first time doing a virtual conference, so it's going to be an interesting one because I'm used to a bit of audience participation, or getting a bit of laughter even going. So I'm probably a bit more nervous than I normally would be, standing there in front of a bunch of people. So I would normally take the advice of imagining my audience was naked, but probably shouldn't do that, seeing as it's a virtual conference and so many people are home working at the moment, right? Might be a little bit too close to home. We're going to talk about patching your security team vulnerabilities. And actually, thank you for Jason. You said you thought the title was very interesting. I actually think it's a little bit dry. So if anybody wants to pop a message on Discord and come up with something a little bit funnier, I'm totally down for that. So thank you very much. You guys have I've already actually got my bio up here. We've already done it all. So just a little bit of information. Tiro Security, 20 years in tech recruitment, always as an external agent, gives you a real good insight into why people take jobs and why people leave jobs. And I think that this is the basis of my presentation. We've gone through the rest of my background. Yes, I absolutely love diving with sharks. So we'll talk about skills gap to start. And of course, some of these numbers have probably changed a lot over the last few weeks, but certainly there's still a huge gap in where requirements are. So according to, this was Forbes, end of last year, that worldwide there was over 4 million roles open, and here in the US over 1 million. Right, so we had some interesting stats brought up in a white paper done by ISACA, the state of cybersecurity. They do it every year, and they released that about 3 weeks ago, and 62% of companies were saying that they were understaffed, and 57% said they had open positions. And I think even with the markets and things going on at the moment, there's no way that can be closed just by a downturn, right? So we're in a really interesting situation at the moment. I like to start with retention. So we're gonna look at patching our leaky bucket. It's no good recruiting and bringing people in. You're losing them as quickly outside. There's no wonder that CISOs are feeling so stressed currently. If you can imagine, 62% are saying they're understaffed, and then 70% of individuals are saying they're actually in play for being recruited. So yeah, you've got over 2/3 potentially of your team that are talking to recruiters or interviewing. I mean, if that's not adding stress when you already know that you need staff, I don't know what would be. So we're going to focus on retention initially. The 3 reasons I think it's really important to look at retention before recruitment is you've got to think about the security community and really how small it is. If you're personally working somewhere and you're not impressed with your company, with your CISO, with your hiring manager, you're much more likely to tell somebody. And if you're talking to other people in the community, that starts getting round. Also, with the understaffing and the overworking, all of us know and are aware of certain companies that are renowned for people having to do long hours to be able to keep up with what they're doing. That's not really a reputation you want. If you're not purposely working lean, then you're going to have that out, because hiring staff into that environment is not going to be fun. And so when you talk about the working environment, a new employee coming in to a negative working environment, you're not setting them up for success. That's the problem you got. So if you don't bring the people into the right environment, you're not going to keep them. I spoke a few weeks ago at RSA, and this is something that came up and actually got quite a lot of attention. People were asking me about it, and it's a retention triangle that I put together that basically are three things that I think they're the three main areas of retention, that when we speak to people and we find out why they're looking to leave, these are the same three things that come up. It's always, everything can always be put into these three areas. Now, you'll see top part we've got there, job satisfaction. Bottom left corner, salary and benefits. And bottom right, location and commute. And what we see is if people have an issue in one of those areas, that's not uncommon. They're unlikely really to leave. And if they do start looking, what tends to happen is companies, if they can, will try and fix that one issue, right? That's when counter offers and things like that come into place. So we don't see too many people moving on with just one of those things. If you've got an issue in two of those areas, then typically you're usually looking or interviewing already. And of course, if you've got an issue in all three of those areas, then you're moving on. And it would be really surprising that you would even still be there at the company. I'm gonna talk in a bit more detail about each of those, give you some examples of what they are. But I would really encourage you as a hiring manager to have very good, close, positive relationships with those that are directly reporting into you. And what's really important is that you're not only discussing work, you're not only discussing what's happening there, but also you know a bit more about their life. And certainly if we start thinking about commutes and things like that, if you don't know where they live, and what their commute's like, then it's very difficult to know that they're happy or not in that area. So we're going to move on to job satisfaction. Well, I said I'd talk a little bit about more stats that came out of that ISACA white paper. 4% of people reported having a heavy workload, and 50% of people were saying they were working long hours. And let's face it, if most companies are understaffed, that's not really a huge surprise. And you can imagine the effect that has on the team culture, the working environment. Those individuals, we're all pretty well aware of these being high-stress jobs, and we need to be working on doing something about that. The other areas around job satisfaction or examples, I would say, actually also came up as ISACA's top 5 advancement obstacles, and they were a limited career path, lack of mentorship, unequal growth opportunities, a lack of training resources, and unsupportive management. And that fits consistently into what we see as external recruiters. It's very much these issues that we're consistently seeing. And so you can have to think, what do I know about the people that are working for me? And likewise, if you're a candidate that's actually looking for a job, help maybe use some of this to identify where your issues really are, because that's going to help you find your next job and know exactly what you're looking for and what you're trying to avoid. So going on to salary and benefits, salary actually ranked really high in ISACA's white paper as a consistent major factor for staff leaving. And I think there's a little bit more to that. Certainly we see a little bit more to that. Very rarely is it, at the moment anyway, base salary. In fact, we're starting to see candidates move actually for base salaries that are lower than they're currently earning. And that's unusual. But the reason behind that is because of a number of things. Companies are making up and retaining their staff better by using things like good stock and equity plans. They do a great job of retaining staff, and I know that's something that things like startups have been doing for some time. But I've got friends that work at very large companies that actually, funnily enough, aren't that happy with some other aspects of their job. But it's very hard to leave when you've got stock maturing every single year. Another thing that people are focusing on to try and retain their staff is 401ks and pensions and health benefits. I think the whole COVID-19 thing is going to have a lot more people looking at the health benefits they're getting. And if we look at other industries that have done amazingly well retaining staff, certainly the public sector do a great job. Those pensions are so good that they've consistently kept their staff for a very long time. And so we're seeing more commercial companies implementing different things in those areas. We're also seeing trends of PTO and vacation time increasing. Of course, you've got these startups that are selling their unlimited vacation or PTO time, but then there's a lot more of your standard traditional companies now that are trying to be more generous. And here in the US, we've known there's been a huge gap between the US and Europe in terms of understanding how people do need a break and how much of an increase in productivity you get when you have that. Family leave is another one, and I know in the political climate at the moment, it's one of the few places that there's bipartisan political support here in the US. And it's having been a recent dad myself, I really have a lot of respect for companies that are doing a lot of work in family leave and making sure that they go above and beyond what may well become law this year. And so the final area is location and commute. And ISACA's state of security actually had the #1 reason for people leaving their jobs was work-life balance. And this part, you'd be surprised how often we get people come in and talk about this. And there isn't a lot of surprises in this, because things have changed a lot over the last few years. It wasn't that long ago that we used to do these things one of two ways, right? You knew where you lived and you knew where you worked, and the only way that changed, or you reduced your commute, is you either moved house or you moved jobs, and it was pretty simple. And we've come so far with technology and the ability to do a lot more in this area, that there's a lot more options. I think I was reading a stat that the average American drives 16 miles each way and spends 1 hour commuting. So that's 32 miles in total. I can tell you that's definitely not somebody in Los Angeles. And most of the competitive markets for cybersecurity actually have the very worst traffic. There was some commute information put out that people were valuing, for every 1 minute of time they spent commuting, they valued it the same as a 1% raise in pay. And so it's really interesting to watch companies work harder on remote working, also doing flexi time around the hours that people have to be in and out of the office. That's a very common one here in Los Angeles. People having satellite offices, or companies looking at having satellite offices, or utilizing co-working spaces for small groups. In the Bay Area, lots of company transport buses brought in for bringing in their staff from certain areas. And public transport, there's a big investment in that, and a big promotion by companies as well as local government for people to be using more public transport. I think what's very interesting at the moment is that with the whole coronavirus pandemic, we're going to see a lot of companies that could, if they'd have wanted to, go more remote or offer more remote, actually having or being forced to do so. And I think that could actually be a very positive outcome from what's happening, because many companies don't do it out of choice. They're not. It's not something that they can't do. It's just that they choose not to offer it. And so perhaps being forced on that will make a big difference. So we'll see what happens. We've seen some interesting changes with remote workers. We're getting most of the people requesting 100% remote actually have never worked 100% remote. And the 100% remote workers that are out there, we're seeing more and more actually call us and say, I'm kind of looking for a hybrid. I miss going into the office. I'd like to just go in a couple of days a week. What sort of companies have you got that are local to me that maybe will allow that? So that's another good thing to think about. So you've got those different areas in what I've coined my retention triangle. I really, really recommend that you do a SWOT of your business and the company, and you understand what your company's strengths and weaknesses are around retention, and also what the opportunities and threats are. So if you're a company that can offer work from home 2 days a week, that pays for certification, sends people to conferences, even if they're virtual, then you know that they're your strengths, and you should be selling on those strengths, and you should be working on them to make sure that they continue to be a strength. And then your weaknesses. I know of another friend of mine that works for a company that they know that they don't pay very well. They're a non-profit, right? And they know that people tend to do pretty long hours, but they are 100% remote, and they do pay for certifications, and it's a really enjoyable place to work, and you're working in a great environment. So they know their strengths and their weaknesses, and they play to their strengths. And of course, they're always working on their weaknesses, and that's what you've got to do. And in terms of opportunities and threats, obviously these are external. I'm assuming most people know what SWOT analysis is, but opportunities and threats are externally what you've got out there. So what can you do? What opportunities have you got that will actually bring through more candidates, will make the current people you've got happy? Your threats, it's good to be aware of them. You know, failing to plan is planning to fail, as they say. So I really encourage people doing a SWOT analysis. So I'm just going to go through a few actions from the retention part of this. I think it's really important you build very good relationships with your direct staff. Certainly, there's a CISO that we placed at a very high-profile company, and I was speaking to him about what he does to retain staff, because I know that the company do a really good job around retention. And as well as their sort of monthly meetings internally, he ensures that his direct reports have a monthly meeting externally. So just grabbing a cup of coffee, it's not makes it sound like a big thing, but it's just grabbing a cup of coffee, shooting the breeze, talking through how things are. And it's amazing, if you build that kind of relationship, you'll get to know your staff a lot more, and you'll get to know some of the stuff perhaps they're dealing with inside and outside work that they wouldn't typically tell you as their boss. So I really recommend building a relationship with your staff. And if you do that, you're leading those people, you'll probably find they'll be doing the same. So I really encourage it. The other thing is to make sure that you're using the retention triangle. So that little thing I put up, think about where each person that works for you sits in that triangle, and what potential issues they've got. And then make sure you're doing the SWOT analysis so you understand your company's capabilities. It's really important that you focus on positive changes, and you work on areas that you really think you can improve. And then what I think you then have to do is make sure you treat all staff fairly and equally. So I kind of understand that it might be the one member of staff that lives miles away that's going to have the most benefit of being able to work remotely or have some flexi time. But you need to make sure that that's not the only person that gets that opportunity. It's the same across the team, because somebody locally might just as well really enjoy that benefit. So just make sure you're doing that. So those are my actions from the retention part of the talk. Now, recruitment, 32% of companies say it takes 6 months or more to fill those positions. And we really see that. We see clients that come to us that have been looking for 6, 9 months. Most of the companies that come to us with that think the issue is out there in the marketplace, and they don't actually realize that their recruitment process is broken. Once we sit down with them and we go through some of the stuff we're going to talk about here, our average time from taking a new job on to placing is 4 weeks. You know, that's something that could have been looking for 6 or 9 months. And most of the time, the issue is actually sitting there, and it's with the company. It needs to be fixed. So it's the same 2 issues that we see. It's quality of applicants, and that kind of matches. They're the complaints that people are talking about. And when you look at the ISACA stats, 70% of companies said that candidates were not qualified. And then if we already know that quantity is an issue because there's 561,000 jobs open in North America. Right, bearing in mind that there's 805,000 people currently working in cybersecurity. Now, of course, that's the US, that's not the whole of North America. That gives you an idea of, we clearly do need more people. So, there are areas out there, but I'm a firm believer that most of the time they're already out there. You need to put some things in play to actually find them. We're going to start with job description. That's what you're using to make sure that you've got the right people. It's really, really important that you have a good understanding of what the person will do day to day. Not what you hope they will do, not what you'd like them to do, but what must they do day to day. And then you're going to look at the skills they're going to need to have to do that. And then you're going to have to look at what's really essential and what's desirable skills. And you've got to really put some pressure on yourself to do that, because it's very easy. We talk about scope creep, quite a lot in pen testing and things like that, but it equally happens in recruitment. We constantly see desirable skills ending up as essential skills when there's no need for that, and it makes things even tougher. Then you've got to look at the absolute minimum. Are those essential skills the absolute minimum skills you can bring people in with? And again, you'll be honest with yourself about that. And then finally, and this is the crux of everything, you need to, it's almost like a sanity check. Do these skills even go together? Not within your company, but externally at other companies. Are these skills that you see come together? So this is Sam. Just because Sam could do this role doesn't mean it's common. People with 6 arms aren't that common, funnily enough. And if you've got a Sam in your business, it's really important you treat them really well and you make sure they're happy. If you want to find another six-armed Sam, you're going to be tough. It's going to be real tough. So in the cybersecurity industry, like Sam would be referred to as a purple squirrel or a purple unicorn, which I've never actually quite got the whole purple unicorn. Kind of figured it doesn't really matter what color the unicorn is, it's still going to be pretty hard to find. Sam's doing multiple jobs, right? So if you need another Sam, or you're replacing Sam, it's going to be really, really tough to find that person. Does that mean you can't fill the position? No, it doesn't. Does it mean you're going to have to be more flexible? Yeah, it definitely does. These are the most common options we see when people are going out and they're struggling and they're trying to find maybe a Sam or just a very high in demand person. And I put some little icons there as sort of around costs and the amount of time it takes actually you as a hiring manager and the costs that you'd be looking at. Number one, you can go out and you can headhunt the person, and typically you're probably going to go to an external company that specialises in doing that for some kind of retained search. It's going to cost you a lot more than generally how you go out and recruit, but you're giving the time and you're giving that to somebody else to do. And so from you personally as a hiring manager, what you get delivered back should be superb quality candidates that are qualified. So it should take you the least amount of time, but it's going to take most of your budget. Not most of your budget, but it's going to cost more of your budget. And then secondly, you could recruit somebody that's maybe got one skill set, and then you could train them into the other one. That's always an option. And something like that, you can go and do a contingency search with somebody external, or maybe your internal recruitment team know what they're doing and they can help you with that. And then the third option is you hire somebody and you train them with both skills, and that might be maybe looking at somebody that's a little bit more junior and bringing them into the company. Or finally, you could cross-train, right? Not a lot of people are looking internally at the staff they've already got within the team, but also externally to the team. People are always interested in changing roles, and this is something that actually helps a lot with retention. Looking at who you've already got, looking at who would be a good fit and bringing them in. There's much less risk with that as well, because they're already in the environment and you already know them very well. So they're the typical 4 options we see that people go down. So recruitment, if you pick probably any of the top 3, you might go down the role, certainly the top 1 and maybe the top 2, you're going to go down the role of an external search. And these are the most common ways we see people doing an external search, so that they advertise. We're going to look at these in a little bit more detail, but they'll advertise, they'll use their internal recruitment team, they'll use an external recruitment agency, and they'll use their network. So advertising is kind of the first area I'm going to talk about. Let's just think about this for a second, right? You're going to advertise for people that work in security and privacy, and then you're going to expect them to respond by sending their personal data through an advert to get added onto a database for who knows how long. And they're going to receive standardized responses to the things that they send, and they may or may not ever hear back from that company. Strangely enough, this doesn't work. It's broken, right? Advertising for cybersecurity, it doesn't work. It really doesn't. Now, do we still do it? Yes, we still do it. Do other companies still do it? Yes, they do. And sometimes that's more about advertising and branding of the company more than actually bringing in qualified staff. We'll talk about the internal recruitment team. ISACA had some stats on this, and they were pretty interesting. 72% of cybersecurity professionals don't believe that their HR department actually understands their hiring needs. That's a pretty scary stat. Now, I've only ever worked externally. I've worked with some terrible internal recruiters, and I've worked with some absolutely amazing ones. So I don't think this issue falls solely or squarely on the shoulders of internal recruiters and HR. But there's a few things that you should be thinking about and qualifying. When you look at your internal recruitment team, do they actually understand what you're looking for? Like really understand, right? They're just using a checkbox to check off what they think they see on a resume, on a piece of paper. Or do they know, if they're looking for this one skill, do they know that these are similar skills that would be acceptable? These are areas you could cross-train people from. That's a big one. Do they understand what they're doing? And then secondly, do they focus just on security? And some people might think that's a little crazy, but there are very large companies out there that do have dedicated internal recruiters that work just in one area. And there's a big benefit to doing that, but it's not possible for most companies. Most companies can't afford to have recruiters just recruiting for one team. You have to have a very, very big team to be able to do that. And if not, it's a real struggle to build a network in our industry in the short period of time that you work on security requirements. If you're constantly flipping between security and accounting and whatever else it might be, how can you ever be a specialist? How can you ever keep your network up to date? Because candidates come on and off the market so quickly. It's very tough to do. And then finally, is your internal recruitment team, are people in it involved in the local community? I think the only time I see internal recruiters at conferences or if they're sponsoring or they've got a booth. I can't think in the last 8 years if I've met an internal recruiter outside of that. I haven't met many at conferences, but certainly not at meetups. Anything where you're spending your evenings going to security meetups and things like that. I don't think I've ever met an internal recruiter, bar the ones that they're hosting. I will say that, and we'll talk a bit about that in a second. But are they involved? They need to be involved in the local community if they're going to build any kind of network and know what they're looking for. So we'll talk about external recruitment agencies. You actually need to ask exactly the same questions as you do for your internals. Do they really truly understand what they're looking for? Are they just using checkboxes? Do they actually know this skill goes with that skill? Do they focus only on security? There are a lot of people that will tell you they focus just on security. When you go onto their website and have a look what they're advertising, I think you'll probably find the majority are looking right across the board. They're a generalist agency. Maybe they're generalist IT, but that's a very different skill set and a very different network. And so bear that in mind. And the same with the local community. Right? If one day I'm recruiting for a help desk person and the next day I'm recruiting for an AppSec person, they're very different. How can I spend my time in all these communities and build my network properly? That's a real challenge. And then finally, your network. And I put you a little star up here by your, because your doesn't just mean you personally, it means your team, it means your company. And you need to make sure everybody's sort of on the same page with this. Now, the local community stuff, I'm a big proponent for it. You saw in my bio that I was one of the founding members of the Cloud Security Alliance, SoCal Chapter. I'm a member of ISSA and OWASP, and I go to those meetings. I'm involved also with some around diversity as well. And we've we've actually done coaching sessions for ISACAs She Leads events. So when you think about the local community, are you involved? CSA, OWASP, ISACA, ISSA, plus lots of people do their own individual meetups. Do you encourage your team to be involved in those? Are you involved in them? And also, diversity is such a big subject right now. And I truly believe that a lot of people that are complaining about not getting enough diverse candidates aren't doing enough. There are groups like Cybersecurity, YSIS, Women in Security and Privacy, the ICMCP, Diana Initiative. These are all great places to meet potentially diverse staff. So make sure that you're supporting them. Host events, sponsor them, and encourage your team to get involved. That's going to be a really good place for you to find good quality local staff. And then conferences. Do your team members go? Do you go? Do you make sure that everybody attending has an understanding of what requirements you've got, just in case they meet that cloud security person, in the bar having drinks? So, make sure that you're communicating that and they're doing those things. And then referral scheme. It's pretty uncommon now for us to find companies that don't have referral schemes. Everybody's doing them. We've seen numbers up to $5,000 for companies that are getting people recommended. So, there's some really big numbers in there. And it's important that you've got something that makes people stop and think, hey, this person could be good. But if you haven't got the retention part sorted, your staff aren't happy, then they might recommend that the odd person they bump into that they don't really know, but they're not going to probably recommend somebody that they have a lot of respect for. So make sure that you've got that retention side sorted to really get the most out of your referral scheme. And then finally, research and presentations. So this is all about credibility and branding of your team, you potentially if you're a CISO or a hiring manager, of the actual company as well. You want to really support your people and want them to get involved in this. And I know we talked about a lot of people being overworked. Many people in the cybersecurity industry come home and work on their own personal security related projects, and that is their relaxing time. So they don't think of that as work. So, if you want to encourage people to do that, that's things that they're actually going to motivate them, and you can watch your referrals increase off the back of that sort of stuff. So, reality check ahead here, people. If you're getting your volume through, but you're still not finding the person, you're going to have to face facts. Either the person doesn't exist, i.e. your requirements are unreasonable. Secondly, you can't attract them, right? Wherever they're working, and there's clearly not many of them, they're very happy, they're being paid perhaps very, very well, they're locked in, it's a great place to work. You can't attract them, they're not applying for jobs, they're not looking. Or finally, it's your process. Now, the top two, you need to go back again and look at your job spec and start back from there and make sure that you've got something that's reasonable, or work where you can make that little bit more flexibility. So let's look at your process. You got your pre-interview process. Who screens your resumes? I hear so much frustration from people and candidates out there that have sent resumes to places and never heard anything back. Or they get turned down, and we've got the job and I'm speaking to them, looking at them saying, I have no idea why this person didn't at least get an interview. So really think about who's screening your resumes. Are they using those checkboxes? Because if you're using checkboxes for skills and that person doesn't really know what they're doing, you're probably losing out on a lot of potential candidates there. Do they really understand what they're looking for? And then just a thing that I recommend, do you sit down with your internal recruiters and do you look at some of the rejected resumes to make sure that they're doing a good job of rejecting the right ones and you're not losing some through that filter? You don't need to second guess and do that whole job, but you need to just double check that. So that's one thing I think you can do pre-interview. You'd be really surprised at how many times things are breaking down during the interview process. And I think they say, what, too many cooks spoil a dinner? Something like that anyway. You've got to think about your process. Does your process include only absolute essential decision makers? Does everybody in there need to be in there? As a hiring manager, are you 100% sure everybody's on the same page? have you had everybody all in a room together discussing what you're looking for? During that period process, you need to be looking at, does each person actually understand their job? What should they be doing? Do they know specifically what they're looking for? Are their questions fit for purpose? Do we know what they're going to be asking people? Are we sure those questions actually screen for the right thing? And I think one great way of doing it, if ultimately this person is going to report into you, I think it's really important to sit in those other interviews. It might be a bit strange, not so much probably for a candidate, but for the other interviewer. But you should sit in and just see what they're asking. And then you'll know, are people duplicating areas, are things not being covered? Are somebody looking for something that wasn't part of what you really wanted? So to make sure that you do sit in and you've experienced the interview process yourself. Hopefully by now you've got to your offer stage, and this is when everything you learned during that retention period comes into practice. This is when ideally the things that set you apart in your ability to retain your staff are the things that you'll be able to use and set yourself apart in your ability to attract staff. What you want to do is make sure that you truly understand why people are in their current company, or if they've already left them, what they didn't like, what specifically they're looking for. And you want to make sure that you sell to those points. You sell the business, you sell you as a manager or a colleague, sell to the things that they're specifically looking for. And this is going to hugely help you close somebody very quickly, ideally, hopefully before they go to all these other interviews. But the chances are nowadays people will get multiple offers, and you're kind of almost giving them the confidence that you're going to give exactly what they were missed. And that's going to be very hard for other companies. And if you know that against your competitors locally, there's things that you do really well that they don't do very well, use that. I'll give you an example of the way I would look at something. So let's say, look, I know you mentioned spending more time with your family was a reason why you were looking to leave your current company. Just, this is how much PTO we give, and this is how flexible we are about working and working from home. We know that in our industry, in this location, really very, very unique to us. So make sure you're actually to do that. That's going to help you close people. And then the A1 most important thing is you must deliver promise. You can't start and them get, then them end up with a completely different job or a different set of options to what they signed up for. Because if you do that, trust me, the community will find out about it. It's not a good place to be. Last part of recruitment, we're going to look at all of the different parts within recruitment. We're going to look at some actions that you should be putting into place. The quality of your job description is first thing you do, and I'm a believer that it's the most important thing you do. Get that right, and you will be able to attract the right people, and you'll know where you can have flexibility and where you can't. Make sure you've got a specific hiring plan. If you're gonna, and whether that's I'm gonna go internal, or I've got budget to go external, or I'm gonna hire somebody in, or I'm gonna hire and train, or I'm just gonna train somebody internally. Make sure you know what you plan to do for that position. And can you go back and change that? Of course you can, but set out and make sure you've got a plan and work to it. And if you're going to go down the external search, make sure you're qualifying everybody that's involved in that. Whether, when we talk about external search, that can still be your internal recruitment team, or it could be an external agency. Make sure that you know what they're doing. Make sure that they understand exactly what you're looking for, and that you have confidence that they're good. They can find the people for you. Reality check. Right. Once you've started seeing candidates, you can have a real reality check as to how good is your job description. Are we getting close to what we need to do? And if you're not, go back to job description or look at assessing your recruitment process. You can use your retention information. That's why we do this retention stuff first. Make sure you use your retention information throughout the recruitment process to make sure that you're encouraging people to stay within the process, and then also to close it. So sell to your candidates' actual requirements. Don't sell generally about what your company can do. Sell to what the candidate's specifically looking for. And then finally, on what you promise. Always. That's one of the most horrible things we sometimes see in this industry. People that join companies and are looking immediately afterwards. you must deliver what you promise. So I think that's me done. And despite the mic problems, hopefully the rest of this seems to have gone a bit smoother. You're more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and drop me messages on there. I've got to say, I don't really use it that religiously. You're probably much better to connect with me on LinkedIn. And of course, if you found me via the Wild West Hacking Fest, then mention it in the note. I get an awful lot of, I don't know how many I'm up to now, but I get an awful lot of LinkedIn requests, and I'm quite brutal. I don't accept everybody, and that's just because I want to stop myself getting so many sales messages. But also I want to connect with people that I think I would be useful for, and they would be useful for. So make sure you put in anything that if you do connect with me, just make sure that it's through this. Of course, if you work in cybersecurity, chances are I'm just going to add you anyway.